Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Founder and Friends. I'm your host, John Daniel Trask. Everybody just calls me JD. And today I am joined by Arisha from our customer success team. Hi, Arisha. Good morning.
Hello, good morning, JD. I'll just quickly introduce myself now. I am Arisha and I am a customer success manager here at Raygun. And JD, I am really looking forward to this session today with you. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about with our customers, and I'm really excited to share it with our viewers today.
Absolutely. For everybody's background, so Arisha's been in our CS team for a little while now. She is one of the most bubbly, positive folks on the team. And we've had this joke that episode 1 was with my wife. So this is episode 2. She's my number 2 best friend,
How lucky
Arisha.
of me.
So happy to have you on the show. And so today, we're going to be looking at these workflows that customers use from small to large. It's very different ways that people work with their data when they maybe have the first couple of errors from their new startup that they've just launched, through to Fortune 50 companies where it's a blazing inferno of faults and they're not really sure how to even start the fight. And so today we're going to be going through all of the different things that Arisha has learned with our customers, as well as some of the things I've seen over the years as well, and hopefully help you level up your own error management with Raygun. Cool. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Arisha. I make her do all the difficult live demo parts. So if anything goes wrong, it's probably still my fault. But anyway, I'll pass to you, Arisha.
Awesome. Thank you for that, JD. So I think a really great place to start is just looking at workflows in general and what kind of types there are. And personally, when I look at this question, I think they fall into one of two buckets. So either you're being proactive or reactive. Now, those two terms, we hear them all the time, but what do they mean? So when it comes to proactive workflows, I think you can take two approaches here. The first is spotting issues before they impact customers, or at least a wide spread of customers. And the second way you can look at it is just putting your customer experience first, addressing issues continuously. Now, having visibility of your performance in a tool like Raygun is already getting you one step closer to being proactive, but it's really the behavior here and the workflows that make that more effective. Now, when it comes to reactive workflows, that's a bit of a scary term because in a dream world, we'd all be proactive and that's where we all want to be. But in reality, we all have reactive workflows and we should, because they're telling us that something is going wrong and something important needs to be looked at. Again, it's just that behavior there about how we handle that and respond to that differ, and something that we want to help you with today. So I think looking at reactive workflows is a really great place to start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And if this is the first time you're seeing Raygun, we'll skip through what you're seeing in a bit more detail shortly. But I think when we look at reactive workflows, it's really good to start with an example. And I think this one here is a very common one we hear from our customers. And it's also something that I think a lot of people can resonate with. So the example I have today is, let's say I'm working at a company and one of our big enterprise customers comes up to us and they say they're having an issue. And you want to jump onto it really quickly, but all you know is their name, their email address, and in most, in customer fashion, they haven't actually told you what's gone wrong. They've just shown you that they have had an issue. So what do you do to understand that and look at how to help them? So here we are, you're seeing Raygun up on my screen here. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump onto this customers tab here. Now, what you're seeing here is demo data. So if you see a similar name, don't worry, it's not real. But what you're seeing here is the first and last name of our customer, and the email address, location, and when they were last seen. Really valuable stuff here. And if you are a person who wants to keep this information private, there are also ways that we can do that, right, JD?
Yeah, so there are ways. Obviously, everybody has different levels of managing their PII data. Raygun itself is fully GDPR compliant. We can do HIPAA compliance and things, but we can do tokenization with our customer section, meaning that there is an ability for you to send a token that you could figure out who the customer was, but would mean nothing to a third party. So you can kind of balance that in there as well. This is going the whole enchilada and saying we're actually saying who they are and are in there. We use this feature a lot at Raygun ourselves. Obviously, that we know who our customers are and it's stored in our own database. And it really speeds up our own support for customers when we can go in and just go, oh yeah, that's jimbob at megacorp.com. Go and have a look at his account. But yeah, absolutely, there are varying ways, and that's the sort of thing that a lot of people do talk with our customer success team about, is setting the levels of sensitivity around the data on your account with you. So anyway, I'll pass back to you there, Arisha.
Yeah. So just continuing on with this example here. So what I would do is I'd either throw in the email address or even just the name of the client. So I'm just going to pop in our friend Ryan here. And we see there's a couple of email addresses here. I'm going to click on the bottom one. And what you're seeing on the screen now are sessions, and this is related to real user monitoring, which we're not going to dive into too much today, but it really provides a lot of context of what a person was experiencing. So if that is important to you, definitely this is like a must-have feature. You can find out things like the load time and how it compares across the board. And there's some really brilliant information here. I really love looking into it, but I think that's something that maybe JD and a future friend, maybe our next friend, will be diving into.
Absolutely. The next session is going to be a deep dive on real user monitoring and understanding the customer experience that way. While we're in here, I'll just make one note. It has always seemed completely daft to me that so many monitoring or observability products have no notion of the end user in them. Like, that's the whole reason we build software. That's the people we let down when it doesn't work. It's the people we delight when it does work. Yet most are just, here's some charts. Raygun's really about saying, this is about the people who use the software.
Awesome. So like I said, we're going to skip through sessions today, but we're going to jump into this errors tab, which is just as interesting. And what you see here is all the errors that Ryan has seen over the last 6 months. And this is dated from newest to oldest. So all I would do here is match the timestamp of this error to the timestamp of the ticket, or like, when they sent through that question. So I'm just going to assume they sent it through, like this failed to fetch, at August 29th. I'm going to assume it's this one here. So I'm going to jump in.
You really would hope that they haven't had so many errors that it's difficult to figure out which one they're talking to you about, but we've seen a lot of things.
We definitely have. Now, if this is your first time seeing Raygun, I'm just going to talk about what you're seeing on the screen here. I know there's a lot of information here, so we'll just break it down. What you're seeing on the main section of the screen here is related to Ryan. So it's Ryan's experience. If we jump into the environment tab, for example, you'll see his like specific details here, like his browser and screen height and width, his operating system and information like that. And if you just jump through, this is all very specific to Ryan, which we're going to jump through in a bit more detail shortly. And if you were to click on these arrows here, it will just flip through different instances. So you'll go from Ryan's experience to Olivia's experience and so on and so forth. And then here on the right, you're seeing aggregated information about the error. So we know that this failed to fetch error here has happened 3,254 times. We can see that it's impacted 921 users, which is actually quite interesting because it shows that some of these users have experienced this error more than once. We can see the instance history here, and I love this part of the section because you can really see trends here. You can see if it's trending up, trending down, if it's spiked up during a particular release. It's a really nice way to see that. And you can also see information about how long this error has been happening for, the first time it ever occurred here, and the latest time, and just a few more aggregated information here. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pass it over to you, JD. What would you recommend to look at to kind of help us figure out what's going on here?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when we were originally designing Raygun, the reason we built this product actually was because when I first started professionally as a software engineer, my business partner taught me how to send an email to myself when something went wrong. Because the ultimate, reactionary response to errors is the pissed off customer contacting you, right? And being like, I'm angry. You don't want that. So I'd get these emails. And naturally, what you'd want to do is say, oh, actually, if this bit of information was in here or this bit of information, this would really help me diagnose this a lot quicker. And so Raygun really tries to capture as much information as it possibly can at the time of the fault and bring that in. But it can be a little bit confronting when you've got this bucket of data and you're brand new to looking at this. So first thing I tend to look at is the actual message of the error, in this case failed to fetch. And one micro little trick here is that each instance in the middle here that you can page through each of the crashes will have the original message, but you can actually change the message on the group at the top of the page there. And you'll see here in this case, we've put bracket GH. And this is a demo system. It's our hint to ourselves that it's integrated with GitHub here. So you can change the group to make that a little bit more understandable when you're looking at it out on the main dashboard. But what I tend to look at is that message first, because unbelievably, most people don't actually read the error message, and it often will tell you something. Failed to fetch, however, is a little bit opaque. It doesn't really tell us anything at all. So my next thing to do is I always look at the stack trace, and that's down here below. And in this case, because it's a JavaScript error and because we are actually hooked up to GitHub, we're pulling through the code blocks here and highlighting the lines in the code that were part of the stack trace. This can be really important for a developer who's triaging the error to get a feel for whether this is a quick, long, or re-architect the whole platform type bug to resolve, which can be really useful as well when you're just quickly triaging through things and understanding what's going on. If you scroll back up a little bit there, and if we go to the custom tab for a moment, so this is something we do. We do have tags which you can set when errors are being sent up to Raygun, and that's handy for slicing and dicing the data. But the custom data block there, this is where you can actually attach anything you like. And in this case, one of the things that we've noticed on our site from time to time is that errors are caused by script blockers. And you think of the canonical case will be something like the Facebook like button, and just about every blocker on the planet is going to try and stop that script from loading. And if that causes an error, it can be difficult to diagnose why. So we actually attach custom data on our errors to say, were there any scripts that were prevented from loading on this page? This would have helped head me off from maybe going down a really elaborate rabbit hole of why this error occurred, only to find, well, because a supporting script hadn't actually loaded in that case. Similarly, I could look at the session and breadcrumbs. I don't know if you want me to talk to these bits right here, Arisha, but in effect, the session here is showing the full navigation flow. So again, did this user generate this error by taking a certain journey to the page? The reason this is also useful is because we do support single page applications, and with more and more logic being on the client side, sometimes it can be a case of how did they actually get to this failure state? So this will show you the 30,000 foot view of their navigation flow, and then and you can see it overlaying there where the error occurred, and that it actually was followed quite quickly by another error. That could be a lead on what's going on in here as well. But if you scroll up there and we click on the breadcrumbs tab, this is more like the events that have occurred on that page and letting us see what the user was clicking on or doing. Now, keeping in mind this is a demo system, so it can be a little repetitive at times, but these are all background calls to our API for a dashboard. So there are some of the things I'd look at. Ultimately, might go and still rely on my good friend Google after I've looked at a lot of this and find that fetch error is quite commonly caused by either backend server has changed and therefore the data that's being received is incorrect. Could be a signal that our cross-origin request handling isn't set up, CORS is not configured correctly. Could be any of these things. Sometimes you can even get fetches that will fail because you navigate away from a page while it has been in flight. So there's lots of different things that you could do. Yeah, cool. So that's the way I would go about tackling that. But yeah, cool.
Yeah, and I really love the section here of the breadcrumbs and sessions because I think recreating those steps are just so important. One thing that I do find happens in that traditional kind of workflow is that you have your support team and they're emailing that client, or that, there's a lot of back and forth going on. What did you click on? What did you see? What was your screen resolution? What time of day was it? You're asking so many questions and there's just so much back and forth there, whether it's through email or over a call. And often in these scenarios, you're asking your customer to kind of go through this potentially negative experience that they had. And I think with this new kind of workflow that we're looking at, there's so much value here because you're not asking the customer for anything. In this kind of scenario, you have all the information here. You know exactly what they clicked on. Something as simple as their screen height and width can make a really big difference here in understanding what went wrong. And I think this is just a really brilliant way to just, really optimize your reactive workflow here. And I think one really great way to look at it is, rather than having that back and forth that could go over for days or hours, you can go into here, have a look at, what's going on. You have all the information you need, and you can make a decision right then and there. Can I resolve this before lunch, or is this something that's going to take a couple of days, or something that needs to be put on our roadmap? So I just think being able to tell your customer right away that, this is being worked on, versus not having that kind of clarification until you go through and find the data, is just so valuable. And if mean time to resolution is really important to you, it's just a really great way to make that stat look a little bit better.
Absolutely. I mean, so Raygun's customers are by and large really quite technical folks, and so we get the benefit in our support team that we do use Raygun, so we always can find a fault when something's gone wrong. But similarly, our audience will often come through and be like, hey, there's this thing, I think maybe you need a null check over here. It's quite a different experience to dealing with, let's call them normal human beings. And so back in the old days before I started Raygun, I used to build systems for those normal folks, and the helpful ones would get in touch and tell you about a problem. But the thing that really opened my eyes once we started doing automated instrumentation was that only about 1 or 2 people out of every 100 will ever actually take the time to tell you about a problem. And that is actually a gift to your organization, that you even know about that fault, that customer cares enough to tell you. Most people just get more and more annoyed and eventually leave. So that's an issue. But I remember back then, and I don't know if it still happens, but the really helpful people would send you a screenshot of the 500 error page pasted into a Word document. Like, here you go, this will help, and you're like, okay, I don't want to be disrespectful, but literally no help at all. So this is where Raygun can really help, because there's a lot of UX books that talk about things like, don't make me think, don't try and make your user have to jump through hoops. And as much as you want to help them, putting in a product like Raygun that's going to collect this data for you, it's a way of not having to harass those few customers that are actually doing heaven's work of trying to help you improve your products.
Awesome. So I think that covers the reactive workflow in quite a lot of detail. And as you do go through this, you will notice some more tips and tricks there. But I think we'll move on to proactive workflows here. I think that's what everyone here is excited to see. So I'm going to jump back into the crash reporting view. And as I said before, if this is your first time seeing Raygun, I'll just break down what you're seeing on the screen in a little bit more detail here. So what you're seeing here at the top, I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit more so we have a little bit more data to work with here. But what you're seeing here is the number of errors that have occurred over time. So this is just over time and just how many we're collecting, per day or per hour, however much, you've specified here. And what you're seeing at the bottom here is how those errors are grouped. And those are grouped by the stack trace here. And you can see error groups and how much they've occurred and how many users they've impacted just over here. And basically, I think the first proactive workflow I want to look at today, and this is a really simple one, but it's also something that I think everyone needs to do once they plug their data in for the first time, is just simply see how the data is being visualized. And the reason why I say that is because you need to figure out what your baseline is and what a common day, week, or month looks like for your team. So what I mean by that is, if you're working for a normal, like I guess like a SaaS company here, and you work with your customers who do a 9 to 5, you'll notice that your weekdays are really busy and your weekends will go and drop down. Or you might notice that, it's really high at 9 a.m. but goes down at 12 when everyone goes out for lunch. Obviously, things vary depending on your time zone, but you'll notice that there are some very clear trends in the data. Now, this is demo data here, so it doesn't quite have those trends. But what you can see here is those spikes. And it's very obvious to see these spikes here. You can spot them quite easily. But if you do know what your baseline is and what your trends are, it's a really nice way to notice that maybe a spike on a Thursday at 6 p.m. is very unusual for your customers. So it's a really nice way to just keep on top of this, figure out what the abnormalities are, and just, work with that.
So it's also, sorry, Arisha, it's also a useful reason for plugging in these sorts of tools to all of the pieces of software that you run. So, Raygun seems like it's a website. We have more than 100 different services that are doing things behind the scenes. And what we sometimes will notice is we can see, a spike in errors that maybe occurs, and it will be because some back-end process runs at that time every day, and it puts maybe too much pressure on a database, and therefore connections start to fail. So these things can all connect together, and it's the importance of not thinking about software quality of particularly in a distributed and complex system about, just this one piece. That's all I really care about. It's like these things actually all interact together.
Exactly. And I think from there, once you've figured out what your baseline is and what those normal trends are, and being able to easily spot those abnormalities, I think the next step from here is adding a bit more context to the situation. So we've actually plugged in deployments here. We've done this behind the scenes already. And just to toggle on that graph, I'm just going to click here and click show deployments. And JD, I have a lot of tabs up, so that's just going to take a while to load. So I'm going to hit the refresh button.
You must have it hidden in the, oh yeah, you've got 2 Chromes there.
Yeah, you can see
Remember
that.
when Chrome became popular because it was fast and high performance? Those were the good old days.
Those were.
Yeah.
But what we can see here is the deployments graph here at the bottom. Now, this is a demo app, so we do have very common ones that just go on all the time. But if you do have a couple that happen at the same time, you can see it just stacks up here. And if you click onto this little bar chart, you can see all the deployments that happen. So you can see that we did 6 on this particular hour. And if you were to deep dive into this, just click the see all button and you can see all of the options come up there.
Yeah, deployment tracking is one of those things that doesn't take too long to integrate into your CD environment. We have lots of docs on that, on how to get set up with lots of different things. So, but once it's in, it's the sort of set and forget, just kind of works forever at that point, and it's a really great way to break up your data.
Exactly. And it just provides so much context as well. Because, if you were to jump into the version here, so I'm just going to jump into this example one here. But it just, what we can see here is that we let you know when there is a new error appearing in the version. We can let you know if there's a regression, and we can let you know if something's still occurring. Now, you're probably wondering how we figure that out. So I'm just going to step back and go back to crash reporting here. And what we can see here in this table is that there are a few different statuses here. You can see active, resolved, ignored, and permanently ignored. Now, the way that we figure out if something has regressed back in the data is by marking something as resolved. So the way that you do that is you just grab your error and you change that status over from activate to resolved, and you'll just see it flicks over to that tab quite nicely. Now, if this error were ever to occur again and we see it come up, Raygun will automatically move this error from resolved back into active. Now, I'm going to do it manually today, but just know that you wouldn't have to do a single thing. We would do it for you. And
we would also trigger a notification there, right?
Yes,
Sorry.
Definitely.
Yep.
And once it goes back into active tab, if you were to go back into your deployments, and we're just going to go through the deployments tab here, which is just another way that you can go back to that screen we were on earlier. But if you just go back into the deployments tab, we'll jump back into that same deployment. But if it were to regress back into the code, it would just appear under this version here. And then obviously, if we see an error for the very first time, we'll know here. And if you know that something is still occurring, and this list can get quite big depending on how much is in your inbox, but it'll just appear on this bottom version here. Now, the reason why keeping track of your deployments is so important is because if something has regressed back in the code, you want to know about that right away because you fixed it before, so it would actually be quite an easy fix to do it again. And it's really valuable to figure out what's going on immediately. JD, I think you actually have a really good story here, or a really good point here that you wanted to share.
Yeah, so I meet with quite a few customers, and what I'd say is any organization that's really past the the 2 founders in a bedroom type stage, typically will have somebody perform the role of observing how a deployment is going once it's in production, maybe for the 15 to 30 minutes after it's gone out. Particularly, we deal with companies that are handling payment processing for folks, online ordering, all of those sorts of things where it's mission critical that their deployments don't suddenly break the ability for people to order dinner or transact. And so this is a great view where they can come in and just see related to this deployment. You can refresh the page, see if there's anything new coming up. As Arisha said, the still occurring list is effectively going to be everything that's all the bugs you still need to go and resolve in your code base. But this gives you a really great view of it. It is also smart enough to take into account the version numbers and handling of that as well. It's not just time-based, and that's really important, particularly if you've got components of your system that are running on mobile devices where you don't control the sudden rollout, or if you're doing staged rollouts where maybe only 10% of your customer base gets this new build. You can see that in here, that you can just track that particular version. And if you actually jump back onto the crash reporting dashboard there, Arisha, I know this wasn't part of our script or plan, but I'll do it anyway.
No worries.
So I was just going to say, if you go back to change the status of one of those errors, there is also a resolved inversion at the bottom, and that's the same powerful feature for, again, thinking of mobile or staged rollouts, where you could say, look, I fixed it in version 2. If it keeps occurring in version 1 point whatever, I just don't care. Like, I can't fix that to forward. That's all that matters. And that logic will be smart enough to say, I'll only change it back to active if I see that error again in version 2 or above. Cool.
Well, actually, it's great that we're back on the screen here because this is where I was going to next. So, good shout on that, JD. But what I was going to say is that I think something that links quite nicely into deployments is kind of how you monitor that or manage that over time. And one thing that I see quite often with customers or people very new to Raygun is that they'll start monitoring their data here. So I'm just going to go back to 1 month. But what will happen is that they'll put out a deployment. So this one actually just went out at 12 p.m. last night. But what they'll do is they'll sit here, put out a deployment, and they'll stare at the screen for a long time, and they'll see if something's curving upwards or curving downwards, and they'll just keep their eyes peeled to see what's going on. And that is totally a fair way to use Raygun. It's actually really good that you are looking at your data. But one way to make that a little bit more efficient is with the power of alerting. Now, this is one of my favorite features to go through with our customers. I think it's a really great way to just manage your data. And I think there are two approaches that you can take with alerting, or at least two very common ones, which is one, like I mentioned earlier, figure out what your baseline is and create an alert for if anything that is above your baseline. It's a really good way to be alerted if something is not going right, maybe the early signs of an incident happening or something similar to that. The other way that you can look at it is I've just put out a deployment. How is it tracking? Does it need my attention? Is something going wrong? So that's what we're going to dive into next. So I'm just going to jump into the alerting tab. And what you can see here is we've actually created a bunch of alerts, but I'm just going to jump into the second one here. And what this is showing us is that if a new error group occurs and it happens 5 times within 5 minutes, please let us know, or let these 2 team members know via email and send through a PagerDuty notification. So I'm just going to edit this alert so we can dive a bit deeper into what this means. So when you're creating an alert, you can set up a name, you can select multiple applications, which is pretty cool, and you can set the particular condition that you want to monitor. This one here, we went for new error group occurs, but what you can do here is set a specific threshold. So if you actually wanted to change this to 80 and you wanted to move this up into 10 minutes, you're more than welcome to do that. You can also add in some more filters. So if you only care about a particular version, this is a really great place to put it. Now, as I mentioned, we can also monitor only the latest deployment. And if that is important to you, you can just click this little button here and it'll just monitor how that latest deployment is going. And my favorite part of this is that you can set through how you want to be notified about this. And the default options are email, Slack, or creating a webhook. Now, we get a lot of emails in this day and age from so many different tools. So being able to set it up to a Slack channel or through another tool of your choice, like MS Teams or PagerDuty, or like I said, Slack, is just a really great way to make this more efficient and get notified in a way that means, the most to you. I've actually seen some really creative ways of people creating alerts, and it's fantastic. But JD, I think you've also spoken to a lot of customers about what they've done here, and it's pretty amazing stuff, right?
Yeah, so the alerting capabilities that we've added to Raygun are really a first step in terms of giving our customers a massively increased flexibility into what to do with that data stream that flows into Raygun, whether it be our crash reporting, RUM, or APM products. And so we are continuing to invest quite heavily in this area. You're going to see more and more and more options, the ability to build these composite rules and connect systems up. It's really cool. We call it alerting. I internally keep thinking of it as more as a workflow engine. And so when we first rolled this out, the exciting thing was to see how will customers use this capability. And we've seen some really surprising engagement. The one that I'm most amazed by is a particular pizza firm was experimenting with the notion that if there is a failure in completing the checkout flow, that they can use Raygun to direct a notification via email to the store that would have been producing that pizza and outline exactly what was in the cart so that they can contact that user and say, hey, would you like us to actually still make you the pizza and order it for you? That sort of thinking to me really crystallizes a customer-centric organization. And I'll be honest, I ate a lot of pizza, and the number of times I order pizzas and something does go wrong, like you're already hungry, now you're coupled with being hangry and it doesn't work, like the amount of rage that you feel when you can't complete that order. But if they then rang me up and said, hey, we're sorry, you're like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Like it is about putting things right with people. I think generally speaking, everybody does know things do do break in the night. So then the question is, what are you doing about it? Which is why we're talking about these proactive flows. But that was one example of taking something like Raygun's alerting capabilities and really thinking about it from a customer point of view of how do we build amazing customer experiences. And I can't wait to see more. Like I say, we're going to keep adding more capabilities to this feature set. It's going to get more powerful, and we'll see more and more crazy things that customers do with it. And soon we're about to also launch an API for this, just sharing a little bit on the roadmap there eventually.
Oh, we love that sneak peek, JD.
Man, everybody loves the CEO saying it on a webinar.
So I'm just going to cancel through these changes. I don't want anyone. I don't want to change an important alert for anyone. So I'm just going to go back into crash reporting here. But I think the main thing we learned from that one there is don't get between JD and ordering a pizza.
It's probably not a good idea, but I've been wowed. I mean, it's one of those things when building out open systems is, as a software team, we are experts in crash reporting and real user monitoring and all this, but you still see these amazing things, and that's why we have these sessions to share some of these ideas and get the creative juices flowing.
Yes. Oh, I love it, JD. So now we're moving on to, I would say this is getting onto our kind of like workflow for our superstars here, the ones who've done everything we've mentioned so far. They've done the basics, they've set up all the like kind of places to add a little bit more context to their errors. But now we're moving on to, you're really putting your performance first, and you really want to prioritize constantly working on things and making your application the best it can be. And I think this is where everyone should be striving to get to. And I think it's definitely something that, is easily like something you can easily add to a current workflow that's already there. So what I want to dive into now is, how do you stay on top of this inbox here? Something that we do see is that if you only address things when they become a big issue, or you're only doing that reactive workflow where you're jumping onto things when someone is screaming and shouting about it, you do notice that this inbox here gets quite big. And something that I see quite often is, we have those errors where it's very common and it's something where you have default responses for or workarounds for your customers. But in reality, at the end of the day, if you just get a developer in there and they have all the context that they can get from Raygun, it's actually something that you can resolve quite quickly with all the information you have available to you. So it's just addressing those things constantly and how to kind of handle that. And what I'd recommend doing here is just looking at your inbox here and ordering it by the users. Now, often we do see that people try to order this by the count and try to handle, if this error is happening the most, we should address it. And that is a totally fair way to look at it. And we encourage you to look at that as well. But what we can see here is that some of these errors happen a lot, but they're only impacting 2 people. So on the other hand, if you order it by the users, you know that you're resolving something for the widest spread of customers, which is very, very valuable. So what I recommend, order it by the users and pop the first 1 to 3 errors into your sprint and have a look at it. Get your developers to have a look at it and see if they can resolve that in, that time frame. Now, obviously, we just say 1 to 3 because it's like a default number, but do what's something achievable with the resources you have and the team that you have and what they're capable of. And by doing this, you know that you're addressing, these technical issues, but you're also giving them the time to work on new features as well. So it's having that balancing act, and it really is something that once people do it, you really do feel the impact. Now, when you are doing this, just jump into the error that you want to look at. And as you see, we're jumping back into that screen we were on earlier, where you can kind of see what's going on here. But what I'd recommend doing is assign it to an individual or a team here. And it just adds that responsibility so that when they do go into Raygun, what they will see is that they just have to jump into their specific error inbox. So they just click on My Errors here, and they will be able to see everything that they need to work on in that current sprint. Now, as you do go through this inbox, one thing that you'll also notice is that you'll spot some errors that are a bit out of your control. Maybe they're created by third-party integrations. If that is the case, just grab that error and change it to permanently ignored. And the reason we recommend doing this is it keeps this inbox clean. It's all things that you can address, and those ones that you can't, it just keeps it out of view and in this other tab here. It's just a nice way to keep on top of your inbox and manage it. And if you even have someone looking in here once a month or at the beginning of each sprint and just planning things out, you will see that this inbox will go down over time.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's also a useful thing to do if you see a lot of things coming out of a third party. And in our experience, unfortunately, often those third parties are the mega tech companies. It's the Adobe e-commerce script, it's the Facebook script, and it's pretty hard to just ring up Zuck and say, "Hey, can you fix your damn script? It's ruining my site." Although,
We wish.
at the rate they're shrinking, he might take calls soon. But it is a useful way to talk to vendors about issues. At Raygun, we've had similar experiences using our real user monitoring, where we start to notice maybe a script that we're using is blocking, say, the site from rendering for 2 seconds. And it's great to be able to take that data to those vendors and actually have a conversation and say, "Hey, are you aware that this is actually causing these sorts of problems for us?" Yep. I was also just going to add as well, Arisha, we've this is a great how to be proactive and keep going, and make sure that you're baking quality in every day. We've also seen customers when they say bring in Raygun and maybe it is already an established system and there is a lot of faults to start working with. They'll either do something like a bug bash week where it's just like, let's just
Yes.
put the team on this, and that's where that assigning things can be really good to stop people treading on each other's toes. We've got one customer who has something that they call Raygun Palooza, which
Yes.
sounds awesome. And even at Raygun, we have had times where we would have within our engineering team what we would call Bug Tuesdays. So if there was a little bit of capacity, the team members could choose to spend that day just working on quality related issues to try and bring it down as well, to give it a bit more push. But
Yeah.
as you say, the challenge can be when you come in here and at the moment it says 48 known issues, and some of our customers put us in and find that they have 4,000. It's quite a challenge.
Yeah, and if you are a Raygun customer and you do feel a bit overwhelmed with your account, or if you haven't quite, if you're just starting with Raygun and you feel a bit overwhelmed with your inbox, definitely reach out to us because it's something that we can help you with and help kind of prioritize and figure out where to start. So do reach out if you do
Yep.
resonate with that experience there. One other thing that I was going to mention here was that you would actually be very surprised about how quickly errors can be fixed once you do actually have all the information. So do definitely encourage you to have a look at this workflow and see how you can add that into your current routine.
Yep. The other thing I wanted to talk about in this section, Arisha, was about driving software quality across the whole business. And so a story I have is about a very successful New Zealand business, went from zero to $1 billion in market cap, I think faster than any other tech company here. And they've been a Raygun customer from day dot, really, of their existence. And the thing that struck me was that they would take key bits of data here about like the number of issues or the general trends, and they would actually report that all the way through to the board of directors. They understood that the customers only deal with them on their app. And if their app is garbage, the business is garbage in the eyes of the customer. And that's something that I don't think a lot of businesses, even digital native businesses, have really properly internalized yet. I think we talked the other day, Arisha, about the idea, imagine if McDonald's as an organization never thought about the experience people had when they went into the McDonald's store. All right.
Yeah.
That would beg a belief. And yet when I talk with tech companies, very few are actually putting this information right up through the organization. Now, why this is interesting is because I see some developers who don't like these sorts of tools because, they're going to see that there's bugs. Sometimes lean on us for that. Bring your director level folks into a CS call, and we'll point out that we have never had a customer who didn't have errors sort of coming out their ears. It's just the nature of software. But it's actually arming an engineering team as well with the data they need to make that argument for why we should invest in the software quality and improving the products, reducing our technical debt. And the language you want to use when talking with the business is like, what do tools like Raygun actually do? Well, what they fundamentally are doing for the business is that they are reducing the churn rate by keeping customers happier. And they're lowering the cost to acquire a customer by ensuring that their experience is good the first time, and that they're going to say, "This is a great company. I want to work with them." And so, bringing all of that, we know that our users are focused at, "I'm going to fix a bug in the code," but ensuring that mentality of software quality and shipping things we're proud of can be shared across the entire organization, including with folks that are non-technical. everybody knows how much crashes suck, whether, it could be, I know it's cliche, but it's true. My mother is very non-technical, but she knows how frustrating when stuff doesn't work can be, and would know why we're tracking that and why it's important to invest in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can see that actually quite a few questions are starting to come up. So we'll address that in quite a second. So if you do have a question, pop them in. One last thing that we were just going to go through as part of this proactive workflow was just this one final tip about what do you do when your error is resolved. So we've been talking about this fail to fetch error here quite a bit. So let's say our developers went ahead, they looked at what JD spoke about earlier, and they found the cause to that problem. So what do you do once this error is resolved? So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back, and I'm actually going to turn this time to 6 months, just so we have we're working with as much data as we can here. So if we jump into that fail to fetch error and say, yay, it's resolved, it's finally out of the way, what do you do to let people know? Well, something that I find is very unique to Raygun, and this is really where you're getting that competitive edge, in my opinion, is jumping into the side here where you see that aggregated information, clicking onto that view button. And JD, we're going full circle here. We're jumping back into that customers tab. And what you see here is every single user who was impacted by that fail to fetch error. And all you need to do, you don't need to go into your support tickets and try to spot everyone who had this error, or you don't need to go through and create a spreadsheet of everyone impacted. All you need to do is click this download option. You'll get an email of this list, and there you go. You can go ahead and email everyone that their issue is now resolved. And I just think it's a really brilliant way to deliver a fantastic experience to your users. Don't you agree? Don't you agree, JD?
Surprisingly, I do. But we talk about this a little internally, which is you get those pop-ups. Do you want to send this error report to Microsoft? And I nearly always say, no, not going to do it, which might seem weird for the CEO of a crash reporting company. But the reason I don't do it is partly because I don't feel like there's any connection between me and the resolution. I'm not going to get an email from the office team going, hey, JD, that crash report you submitted 2 weeks ago? The latest update has a fix in there for you. We're really sorry about that. But think about that for a minute. Like, what experience would that create for me as a customer in terms of building trust, with that organization? This is actually an area where smaller organizations can compete unfairly very easily. And so we use examples where, there's a small auction site in New Zealand, and when they have faults, I've always said to them, I'm like, why do you not just fix the fault, pull out this list and give them like a $10 credit on their account, and you take that experience that you created that wasn't great for them, and you fix it, you show them you care, and then you give them an incentive to come back and re-engage. And it's a virtuous positive cycle there for the organization. I understand we all generally want to build customer-centric businesses. We all want to be proud of the work we do, but we also have to acknowledge that there's a lot of priorities in any day of the week. And that's where, hopefully, with what we've covered today in this session, we can show you how to try and minimize the amount of time you have to spend actually being proactive about errors, and give you more time in the day to think about these amazing experiences that you could create with tools like Raygun.
Awesome. Well, I think that covers everything that we planned to talk about, JD, but I think it's time to look at those questions that we're getting through.
Awesome. Always love the questions. They're the things we can't prepare for. Cool. So the first question there, I'm new to Raygun and was surprised with how many errors are occurring. What's a good target for crash-free users? Well, we didn't touch on crash-free users at the moment, but shall I give a quick intro on that one, Arisha?
I also think that, while we didn't go into real user monitoring, I think we can also give a sneak peek as well of what you can get there.
Yeah, that's cool. Why don't you load it up and I'll give a little talk here. So crash-free users, if you have real user monitoring and crash reporting from Raygun, real user monitoring gives us insight into the total number of users and interactions that are occurring in your site, and we measure the performance for it. But because we have that data, We can then overlay that with the data we have out of crash reporting to give you this crash-free users percentage number at the top right there. Now, this is showing that 96.36% of users are having a crash-free time. That's great. And we see a lot of our customers track that up. And that'll be their North Star, if you will, for are we improving quality over time? Now, the question is, what's good? Well, great is obviously 100%, but it's also a touch unrealistic. We've seen numbers from customers that range anywhere from about 99.99, really, really high quality software. Some of them down in the 40s to 60s. Now that is a bit troublesome. And that's the sort of work as well that we will engage with our customers, people with folks like Arisha, to help you work on the best plan for getting there, because we do see so much from different customers that we can say, hey, you tackle this, you put in place these workflows, you'll help improve that. But have I missed anything there, Arisha, on your experiences around crash-free users?
I think you've touched everything there, but one thing that I would add is have a look at your crash-free user score and create a plan that's realistic for you. So if you are currently sitting at, let's say, 60%, don't strive to get to 99.9 in like a day. That's just not achievable.
The JD gym plan right there.
No, we do genuinely actually see people try, because they get really upset when they do see that stat and they realize it's not as great as they thought. This stat is actually very important. It's something that once you realize it's there and something that that you can fix, it's something very serious. And like you said, it can be that North Star of how is your application performance going and how can we make it better. So what I just recommend there is have a look at your score and find a plan that's achievable for you. If you are at 60, just aim for a little bump to 70 and just slowly, gradually go up from there. And if you are wondering how to improve that score, I'm sure this is something that JD and, like I said, our future friend in our next episode will talk about. But if you do want to make that score a little bit higher, all you need to do is go into crash reporting and have a look at those workflows we looked at and try resolve some of these ones here. And like we said, ordering it by the users, that you're getting that widest range there, you're casting your net as far as possible, and it can really make that score jump up higher quite quickly.
Yeah, and I know I touched on it already, but do bring us in to any conversations you're having in your organization as well, because we do see this stuff and we can help have that conversation further up the org chart as well. If you want somebody external to be able to say, look, this is actually what does happen out in the world there. This is normal, and here's how we're going to take you from normal to beefcake. We can do that.
Yeah, and our CS team, we work with a bunch of different people, from support teams to product managers to CTOs to executive teams, and we can really work with your team to make a really good plan of how to move forward with that. So if you do need any help or you want to see how you can make things even better, please do reach out to your CSM or to our support team, and we'll, point you to the right direction.
Yeah, and you can always reach support at Raygun with that contact Raygun link in the sidebar there. It's quite funny. We get a lot of people. Obviously, we've got technical audience who often want to fix problems themselves. We do have some good docs there, but our support capability is fantastic, and so we'll often get that software engineer who's maybe a little less trusting of talking to people, and they'll get in touch and go, wow, this is actually fantastic support and solve my problems. So we're always here to help. All right, we are at time. We've pushed a little bit near the end, actually. So really appreciate everybody joining today. If there are any further questions, of course, you can contact us at Raygun, reply on Twitter, on LinkedIn, everywhere that we're going live today. And then, next month we'll be talking about real user monitoring with my third friend. Yeah, that's more friends than I've ever had. So thank you so much for joining me today, Arisha. I do really love the energy you bring to these, and I know how much you help our customers. So it's awesome to be able to take those experiences and broadcast them to everybody who's keen. So thank you. Awesome. Good times.